Hello one and all, Jasper here, and I debated on if I wanted to make a video on this topic at all, if I wanted to have it scripted and edited, but at the end of the day I thought, why not just have something unprompted and just give my general first thoughts. And good God, it's been over a year since George made his blog criticizing the second season of House of the Dragon. And, well, some would say that this is the first sign of things beginning to go downhill. Though I would argue it started a bit sooner. Once, and I'm going to butcher his name, Miguel Sapochnik left the show. He was the other writer to Ryan Condal, and after the first season, left. Why? It's hard to say for sure. This website and others that I've come across said that it's because he wanted to give his wife a job. Right here, per the report, Thrones vet Sapochnik wanted Rabin, his wife, to join his and co-showrunner Ryan Condal's producing team for Dragon's second season. HBO thought she did not have enough experience. The negotiations got so heated that HBO had a mediator attempt to cool things down, but Sapochnik eventually walked away from the prequel spin-off he helped launch. In this case, I don't know if it's true or not, I'm not the biggest fan. It seems a little petty to leave a production if, they simply aren't giving you your wife a job. But I will say, in hindsight, they probably should have done it because maybe then we would have gotten a second good season. And, well, if you had high hopes for the third season, I don't think it's going to get any better because George himself has voiced his displeasure. You can find this on many other news outlets, but pretty much he says the current relationship between him and Ryan is abysmal. Mentioning and quoting such as saying, he used to give a lot of notes and Ryan would listen, change some of them, but as things progressed, the changes got less and less and less, more ignoring and arguing, and eventually got to the point where HBO contacted George apparently and said George can give them their notes, and then they will give combined notes of George and HBO's to Ryan. And so it's just more and more disconnect between the two. And I have to say, it's very surprising to hear George be this vocal of his displeasure with how the show is going, because you have to remember, Game of Thrones exists, and it has one of the worst endings ever created. Yet George doesn't really bash it. He might make a few comments or snide remarks, but he keeps it very reasonably professional. And I think it's two things. I think first, burn, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. I think this second deterioration of his work is probably hitting him a bit harder than the first. And also, I'll talk shit about D&D till the sun falls out of the sky, but in their defense, they ran out of book material. And probably when you're making changes at that point, when you have no more books, it probably also doesn't hurt as much. Whereas compared to this, they're making drastic changes that simply don't need to be changed. And, it's a lot of he said, she said, because obviously if you get Ryan's opinion on the matter, he says something along the lines of, I made every effort to include George in the adaptation process. I really did. But at some point, he just became unwilling to acknowledge the practical issues at hand in a reasonable way. I just have to keep marching forward for the sake of the crew, the cast, and for HBO because that's my job. I can only hope that George and I can rediscover that harmony someday. And listen, we don't know the whole story. And whenever there's, have you ever heard this saying? Whenever you get two different stories, there's actually three possible answers. There's one's telling the truth, the other's telling the truth, and the truth is actually in the middle. And given George is quite experienced in the show industry, I refuse to believe that he is unwilling to acknowledge the practical issues at hand, especially because a lot of the show changes are more expensive than the books, like in how it would be depicted. You're telling me that Rhaenyra bursting through the dragon pit, killing all those small folk, would be cheaper than doing it as it is in the book, where you have Aegon being coronated, that word, made king with a sunfire like kind of in the background. Like at I feel like at most it would be the same cost. So I can't believe that Ryan's stance has a whole lot of water. But that's just my initial thoughts. I didn't have a lot of hope for the third season, and this is honestly just kind of confirming that I think the third season might be worse than the second. But I'll of course watch it and I'll cover it. But hey, Hedge Knight is coming out in just 2 days at the time of recording this, so who knows? Maybe that will be the final good Game of Thrones adaptation that we deserve. With all that said, stay safe, and I hope you all have a wonderful night or day.